It's really not about what's best for the kid or whether or not the divorce is or the marriage is working or not. It's about this ongoing conflict with the other parent. And I'm willing to burn everything down in order to perpetuate that conflict.
Hello, and welcome to the Attorney Post, your guide to the inside scoop when it comes to all things legal. And now, here's our host, Justin West.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Attorney Post, where we discuss what's going on in various facets of the law with the lawyers at the top of their game to help you navigate the ins and outs of the various legal fields and jurisdictions. Because, as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Today, I'm joined with Fred Dunsing of the law firm that bears his name, currently Dunsing, Deakins, and Galera, although I do believe there's some changes in the masthead coming. And I'm happy to be joined with Fred. He practices family law out in Colorado. Fred, how are you doing today?
Okay.
Awesome. Well, let's jump over really quickly, as always, and let's take a look at your website. You can go to dunsinglaw.com. I think there's been some changes recently to the page. It'll look differently again when you guys take a look at it, most likely. I love the background. I got to say, it's a really beautiful picture of beautiful Colorado. You see the Rockies there and everything else. You can visit Fred at dunsinglaw.com. As always, we will have a link in the description down below. And usually I have the phone number in front of me. I just realized I don't have the phone number for the firm, but it's around here somewhere. It's on the website. Go to Dunsing Law and you'll find it. And I don't see it anyway. Fred, you can shout that out here in a minute. Actually, it's probably on your contact page. We'll just jump there really quickly. There
we go.
You can call 303-758-8981 in Denver or 970-323-0023 in Avon. I suspect those all forward to wherever you are. Anyway, right. So let's jump over really quickly and read from our first sponsor, and that sponsor is Groove Funnels. If you love spending thousands of dollars to build a website and you love paying hundreds and hundreds of dollars every month to host that website on a platform that allows you to, buy and sell products to your potential clients or customers, then by all means, keep doing whatever it is that you're doing. But if you're like me, you hate that stuff. And that's why I personally recommend Groove Pages, the all-new, all-in-one funnel website sales platform from internet marketing legend Mike Filsaime. Visit theattorneypost.com/groove to sign up for free and build a complete site at no cost. Really, truly at no cost. There's no cost. You can actually build, I believe, up to 3 fully functioning websites at theattorneypost.com/groove. It's basically a Swiss Army knife of a platform that allows you to build webinars and sales funnels and websites and blogs and basically anything you can imagine. And again, there's no cost, no credit card needed to sign up. I know that they have added pay plans and everything else, but visit theattorneypost.com/groove to sign up and learn more. Our second sponsor at the top of the hour is nationalerc.org. You may have noticed that the world just went through a pandemic and many businesses were forced to shut down, reduce their hours, had supply chain issues, interruptions, and ultimately suffered from reduced revenue in 2020 and 2021. What you may not know is that the Congress recently passed the CARES Act, which allocated $400 billion in stimulus funds for small businesses that never need to be paid back. This is not a loan like PPP or Paycheck Protection Program. What this is essentially free money for your business that can be spent in whatever way you think makes the most sense. And right now, National ERC is helping small businesses get the maximum amount of money that they can, and you can calculate and see how much you can get by visiting nationalerc.org. The average small business they work with gets back over $200,000 that they can invest in their business. And again, this never needs to be paid back. It is basically free funding. The calculator also is free, and there's never any fee unless they secure funding for you. Visit nationalerc.org. All right, so I am joined with Fred, and hello again, Fred. How are you doing?
Good.
Well, Fred is a lawyer, obviously. He's got a very diverse background. He's worked in E&C, he's worked in software, he's worked in manufacturing. He got an MBA, and then while he was working full-time with that, he went on to attend law school at night. During his time in law school, he gained a lot of experience in client representation, trial work through student law office at the University of Denver. He's practiced in lots of different areas. He's practiced in business organizations, criminal defense, civil law, etc. But for the last 20 years, he's focused almost exclusively, I believe, on family law, which includes, of course, divorce, legal separation, annulments, child custody, property settlements, post-degree modifications, paternity, etc., etc. He's highly regarded in his profession. He's received the preeminent AV rating from Martindale-Hubbell, which always means that's really basically the highest review that an attorney can get from essentially a peer review organization. And he works hard to find cost-effective solutions for his clients during negotiation, litigation, appeals, etc. So my question number one, Fred, as always, is what did I miss?
Nothing. I think you hit it all, except I've been in practice for about 25 years now, but I think you hit it all about what I do.
That's what I get when I borrow notes from the page, and I don't do the math on my own.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Actually, I think that's what the website says. It's not a new site, so it probably does say 20 years.
It was updated about 5 years ago. I see. Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Fred, question number one, I know I just kind of went over the basics there, obviously. But give me your pitch. If you and I were in an elevator and I was like, Fred, what do you do? What do you do? Who do you serve? Who's your primary clientele? Who do you like to work with? What kind of cases do you really specialize in? Give me the scoop.
We do the broad range of family law, and that ranges from, like you mentioned at the top of the show, divorce, child custody, annulments, child support cases, pretty much the whole gamut. I think that the primary focus, I do a lot of divorce work, but not as much as I used to. And the divorce work that I do is primarily for women, not necessarily for guys. Nothing against guys, but it's just the nature of the business and who comes to see me. I probably like to concentrate more on child custody than I do anything else, because if there's any kind of satisfaction in this work, that's where it is. I really don't like to preside over breaking up families, but when you can do something to help a child, that's a good day.
That makes a lot of sense. And I have to admit, I've always thought that family law must be one of the toughest legal niches or facets of the law to work in, just because, again, you're dealing with a lot of people sometimes that they're close to their lowest. That in criminal law, like you're meeting people.
It absolutely is. You see people at their very worst, at the worst time in their lives. And when they come to see me, they generally say, I'm counting on you, because whatever goes wrong in my life from this point forward is in your hands. You have to save this for me. And that's a lot of pressure. It really is.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. And again, I never went into the law. I used to take the LSATs for fun. I thought they were fun, the little the logic tests and whatnot. But I don't think I had the mindset for law school. But I always figured if I did, I didn't know that. I don't know what area I would have gone into, but I always felt like I would find those two niches just to be the hardest ones. But I'm always amazed when I meet someone that's just like, you know what, that was my bread and butter, and that's what we did.
They are. They're from an emotional standpoint, they're very difficult.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, so here's another question for you. Obviously, I just read one of our sponsors, nationalerc.org, helping small businesses, if they went through the pandemic and lost funds, or even if they made money but they suffered because of the pandemic. Obviously, we're coming out of that pandemic right now. We've had a lot of changes. I've talked to a lot of attorneys in lots of different states and lots of different facets of the law, and they've all kind of had a different experience. So I guess I'm kind of curious, Fred, what was your experience of the pandemic? How did it affect your practice? How did it affect the way that you worked on a day-to-day basis? How did it affect the way you interface with your clients?
The effect is probably pretty much the same for most people, but in my particular case, it had to do with the lack of personal appearances. All of a sudden, when this hit, you went from going to court and meeting with clients and doing things on a personal basis to everything being done virtually or by remote means. Zoom, the courts use WebEx. And we still haven't gotten away from that. The courts are just now starting to get back to personal appearances. Mediation and the other parts of my practice are still in a virtual setting, and so it's starting to change a little bit. It's starting to go back, but it's not anywhere near back to the way it was.
Gotcha. Did you find that it opened up some avenues for you, made things a little more convenient? Do you think as we leave the pandemic, you're going to kind of go back to the old ways, right? As if, the world of still having email and documents and everything else is old fashioned in the grand scheme of things. But do you think certain things are going to stick around, or?
It's convenient from the standpoint of not having to go to court as much, but it's very inconvenient from having to conduct hearings virtually, because entering documents or exhibits into evidence is a lot more difficult. You have to make sure that your witnesses and the courts are provided with this evidence in advance of the hearing, where before you were just bringing it into the courtroom with you. And so I don't like that. I really don't like I don't know any attorneys that like the virtual way of doing things. So I expect that when the courts are fully back to in-person court appearances, that we will get back to doing things the old way. And I'm fine with that. I think that doing things virtually for mediations is probably okay. But for court and having hearings and evidentiary hearings where court is going to enter orders that affects these people's lives, that it should be done the old way.
Yeah, with that face-to-face actual human touch.
Right.
I was talking to a couple of it's probably last year at this point. I was talking to a lawyer who did a lot of trial stuff, and he's like, honestly, I fear the day they try and do like a Zoom trial with the jury and everything else. He's like, because in my line of work, one of the things I depend on is, the prosecution says something and I know that it's wrong, and I can give a side-eye glance to one of the jurors and he looks at me and I look at him and we connect, and I know that I just won him over on this point. And he's like, you can't do that on Zoom. I mean, even, you and I, we're simulating eye contact more than actually making, real eye contact. And so, yeah, I think there's definitely some areas I feel like you would lose a real aspect of the genuine humanity of people in that. So, and I was just kind of curious.
I think that's very true.
So, so let me ask you this. I know that you practiced for 25 years now, give or take, and I am sure there's been some ups and there's been some downs. One of my favorite questions to ask people, because I'm a firm believer that failure is sometimes one of our biggest teachers. And I'm also a firm believer that failure is not really a failure if you learn from it. It's just kind of a slow burn win. So I'm sure, Fred, at some point, maybe early on in your legal career, you had some setbacks, or you had something you would consider to be a failure. Maybe a case was decided not in your favor or against your client. Your client said the wrong thing at the wrong time or did something. And hopefully, obviously, it's something you learn from and you carry forward to help your clients. So can you tell our listeners about a time or two where you've experienced a failure of some kind and how you carry that forward to help your clients?
Sure. And I think that the what I consider to be failures would be less than optimal outcomes in the courtroom. And I learned early on that, this profession is full of really smart people. And I'm not going to go toe-to-toe with these guys. The only way I can beat them is to outwork them. So what I do going in is just prepare more and harder than anybody I'm going up against. And what I learned is there were attorneys in the early days that I knew their names, I knew their reputations, but I could go into court and beat them if I spent the time preparing, if I just out-prepared them. And so that when I didn't do that, when you get lazy and you go into court trying to do a case without the preparation that it takes, then I think that's where you get in trouble. And so, from dealing with your client that not everybody is as they present. And so, a failure for me would be seeing a primary custody of a child being given to a person isn't the right person to get it. And so I once in a while, these people will be highly persuasive to the court, and that there's not a lot you can do about that. But most of the time, it's the level of preparation that you're willing to put in on the front end that decides these cases. These cases are highly fact-driven. There's only so much law you can apply in this particular type of area of practice, anyhow. And so I think for me, the winning, the way I stand out is to outwork the other side. And I'm talking from the standpoint of working 7 days a week. I've always had clients call my office on a Sunday afternoon and be amazed to get me here, to get me at the office. But if I know I've got something coming up on a Monday that I need to prepare for, that's where I am.
Gotcha. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, just on a related question there. And I know you said one of the most important things you do, you said this earlier, in fact, was, helping make sure that kids are with the right families. How do you find that balance, right? Have you ever been in the position where your client may have been the one that probably wasn't in the best interest of the kids? What do you do in those situations?
People that are successful in this business tend to have a knack for picking the right side of a case, to be honest with you. And sometimes you don't wind up on the right side of the case, but you still owe that person your duty of loyalty and your duty of hard work, and do everything you can to make sure that they prevail. Now, thank God I haven't had the kind of a case where, I have a criminal who wants to have custody of a child. And these criminals that I'm talking about could be child molesters. That's the worst scenario, right?
Oh yeah.
But I've had them. And if you can't live with the potential outcome in the case, you have to get out. If you took the case and it was a mistake, you have to get off the case. Otherwise, you have to be prepared to work as hard for that person as you would anybody else.
Oh, that makes sense. I'll come back to these questions in a minute, because I kind of want to dig in a little bit further. I think you've got a wealth of knowledge I'd love to tap. But let me ask the flip side of the question before. So I asked you about a failure and what you learned. What's one of your biggest successes, or what's one of the things that when you think about you're most proud of?
Well, one of the successes would really just be the flip side of that coin, where you're representing the right side in a case, the right party, and having a child be in the custody of another parent that would simply be a disaster. That does more to fire me up than anybody, even after doing this for 25 years. So I think that having the outcome of a case be that the child goes with the parent is the right choice, then that's a good day for me. I know I've done my job well, and I've managed to convince the judge to look at it my way. So that's a good day for me.
Gotcha. So when you're working with clients, I suspect that there's all sorts of misconceptions that they bring into your office. They think you're, just talking with you is going to be a fix-all, right? What is the process, first off, of working with you if someone is interested? And again, Fred works in the Denver, Avon area in Colorado, doing family law. But if somebody wanted to work with you, what's the process of them working with you? But also, when people come to you, I'm sure they come with misconceptions. What are some of the biggest misconceptions people bring to your office?
There's two areas of practice. One is what they call pre-decree, which is coming to see me pre-divorce or pre-child custody case. And that's really starting from scratch, where you're talking to these people about what is in the best interest of the child, and everything in this business is couched in those terms. What is in the best interest of the child and why? Then there's the post-decree, which is our modifications of existing orders. And even in that case, there could be some kind of cases that are rooted in endangerment, right? Where you have to be able to show the court that under the present court orders, the child is in danger. But most of the time, it's again in the best interests of the child. So when somebody comes to talk to me about what they want to do, that's pretty much what we talk about. Why do you think what you want is in the best interests of the child? And then it's what can we do under the existing laws to make that happen, because sometimes, sometimes you can't. And a good example of that is somebody who comes in and says, well, I've already agreed with my wife, we're not going to pay any child support for this child. Well, that seldom works for the court, because
Right.
child support is the right of the child. It's not the right of the parent, and the courts don't let the parents contract away that right. So unless the parents are close in income and in parenting time, which is what child support is typically calculated based on, it's unusual for a court to say, oh yeah, we're just going to let you guys go out of here without having to pay anybody any support, because that affects the child.
Right. Have you ever had a couple come in, or one half come in, and in the process of working through the issues that they've had, help them like even uncover a problem that they didn't realize they were having, that allowed them maybe even to not actually get a divorce? Does that ever happen, where couples seek a divorce, start the process, and then decide, you know what, let's not do this and let's continue on?
Sure, once in a while that happens, but I got to tell you, it's rare, because Colorado is a no-fault state, like a lot of the states are. And so if one of these parties want a divorce or want a particular outcome in a case, they're going to get their day in court. And so that's it's rare that I see cases where people really decide down the line not to do this thing because they just haven't contemplated divorce right, and they don't want to get away from the other parent. The more usual circumstance is for a parent to get caught up in their conflict with the other parent and realize this really isn't about the kid. It's really not about what's best for the kid or whether or not the divorce is or the marriage is working or not. It's about this ongoing conflict with the other parent. And I'm willing to burn everything down in order to perpetuate that conflict. That's not a good thing.
Oh, absolutely not. I hate to see that when that is the case. So do you work with other professionals, mediators, therapists to help your clients?
Yeah, I do. With mediators, because there's usually every court has a standing mediation order. So before you get your day in court, the courts want to see you attempt to settle this yourself. And frankly, a settlement that the parties reach is much better than having a stranger in a black robe that doesn't know you, doesn't know your family, making decisions for you. The other things that we'll use are financial experts. We'll use people that will value companies, that will do forensic accounting to come up with a person's real income, because that's used in the calculation of child support. And psychologists, if there is a custody battle, oftentimes it's how are the kids being affected by this, and what has been the history of this relationship and the impact on the child, and really what are my recommendations for, what are the experts' recommendations for what custody and visitation should look like down the road. So yeah, to answer your question, it's not uncommon at all and I think you understand that it's especially in the financial aspects, it's not unusual for people to be less than honest about their incomes. And so oftentimes you need a forensic accountant or a financial expert who's going to look at the incomes of the parties and say, no, this guy really makes this, because that's the help that the court is looking for.
Gotcha. That's so disconcerting in some ways, right? So I know that I have mixed feelings about taxation in general, and I hate to think of people in the process of having their families dissolve, having to be more accurate in their in their taxes, so that there's a very clear estimate, and then their taxes go up too, on top of support and everything else that can come out of that. Anyway,
You
that's
know,
just
I used to think that that would be an issue, that courts would immediately blab whatever comes out in court to the IRS, and it would have negative impacts on parties for taxes. It really doesn't. All the court does is just use it in terms of what should the child support obligation be. I've yet in all these years to see a case where the IRS or the government gets involved in the tax issues with the parties.
Okay, well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Hopefully I never, find myself on that end, but
Yeah.
it's a question that kind of popped up in my head. I know that there's a lot of military installations in Colorado. I mean, they're all over the country, obviously. What are some of the unique challenges that arise when one of the parents is in the military, or if they're being moved to another state, or if even if it's not military, if one of the parents has a job and they're moving, what are some of the issues that people need to be looking for, the challenges that arise when those situations come up?
Primarily retirements. Most of the military divorces and family law issues that take place in El Paso County, which is Colorado Springs. And so attorneys that practice in that area need to understand government retirements, military retirements, and the fact that a lot of these guys, for reasons I don't fully understand, will get disability ratings on their way out of the service that has a great impact on the income that they make. So I just finished a case in El Paso County where both of the parents were enlisted people. I don't know what they made as enlisted people, but these guys were both with the disability ratings and their current employment. And most of the time they'll come out and they'll work for a government contractor. They make $100,000 a year, which to me is astronomical money for what these guys did originally. But I guess it's not. Somebody that practices in this area is probably used to seeing it. I don't do a lot of military work, primarily because of the retirements, and I just don't feel qualified to weigh in on this. The child issues are the same, and most of the cases that or a lot of times these people will find themselves in relocation cases. For example, in Colorado, if the other parent doesn't agree, you have to get an order from the court to relocate a child. And so a lot of times these guys will come out of the military and they'll want to go back home to California. And the one that they're leaving somebody here who doesn't want the kids to move because it affects their relationship with the children. And they're probably the most difficult cases to do because somebody's going to lose.
Gosh, yeah, no, I can imagine. I mean, I feel like that's almost every case, right? Somebody's going to have to lose in some sense. And at least there's give and there's take. But yeah, I imagine there's very unique situations in those scenarios.
Right.
So here's a question. You've been practicing for 25 years. What changes have you noticed over the last 25 years in your practice of law? Whether that's in the way the law itself is processed, whether that's in the problems people bring to you and the ways that divorce has happened now versus 25 years ago. Are there changes? Is everything really just more of the same?
I think that by and large, it hasn't changed all that much. Although when I say that, I would have to back up and say that I see more unmarried parents now than I did at the beginning. And that's not new. It's just the way it is. I think that change happened fairly early on in my career. So now, to run across an unmarried couple or unmarried parents is not unusual. And in fact, what's new these days are probably the concept of civil unions, divorces between same-sex partners. Those are things that I never saw before. Yeah. So that's something that's fairly recent.
Well, they didn't even exist, more than a decade ago, right? It's whatever the blanking on the name, but whatever the law was that made it the law of the land. Anyway,
Right.
it's fascinating. So yeah, obviously some of these things are new and un you know, unheard of before 10 years ago at the very least. So what advice, I guess, what advice do you have, Fred, for people that are going through a family law dispute, in terms of managing their emotions and also staying focused on what the actual goals are? Like, how do you keep people on track and guide them through that process?
What I would do, what I would say would be get to mediation, work on collaborating more than using the conflict in the process, because nobody wins with that. And I, for one, sure would not want a judge making a decision for me. So to the extent you're able to communicate with the other party and come to a resolution that makes sense for your particular family, that's my advice.
That's good advice.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. Were you?
No, that's all I
Okay.
was gonna say.
I didn't want to, it sounded like I felt like I cut you off there. Well, Fred, I really appreciate the time you've spent with us. I feel like we've had a very taciturn, very to the point, good, solid answers, and I really appreciate that. I don't want to take up a ton of your time. So here in a minute, what I'll do is we'll take our turn to the wind down for our call, and I'm going to ask you my two questions that everyone likes to hear. Before I do that, though, we'll jump over and read from our last sponsor, etc. So question number one, so you can kind of prepare yourself. Is if we were to go back in time and meet a young Fred fresh out of law school, what advice would you give to yourself and why? And, by extension, what advice would you give to, a new law school student fresh out of law school, trying to maybe set on their own, do their own practice or whatever it happens to be? And then question number two is, if I give you my magic pen, this one is from the Spice Merchant in Wichita, Kansas. It even says stolen from the Spice Merchant in Wichita, Kansas. That's a shameless plug. I get nothing from them. They just have decent coffee. But this pen, I happen to find out, can write laws on the books that aren't there, can edit laws that are there, and even delete laws that are on the books. And so I want to know, if I gave you my pen and you could change one law, you could add a new one, delete a law, or make an edit to a law. It could be a big, national sweeping ramification law, or a stupid tiny little local law that makes you fill out forms in triplicate. What law would you change and why? While you're percolating on that, see, it's a pun because it's a coffee shop. Let's jump over one more time, and we're going to take a look at your website again. This is dunsinglaw.com. As always, we will have a link in the description down below to Fred's website. That's dunsinglaw.com on the contact page. Or you can just click the call us button. Look at that. There's the phone numbers right there, whether you're in Denver proper or outside of Denver towards Avon. He's got multiple offices, multiple numbers, and doing family law, serving clients all throughout the state, the lovely state, the Rocky Mountain state, the Mile High state that is Colorado. So our last sponsor is Rank with News. If there was a guaranteed way to get your law firm or business featured in major national publications like Yahoo News, Forbes, Bloomberg, and others, and to see those articles ranking locally, sometimes in under 8 hours, for major competitive keywords that people were looking for, what else would you need to know? Rank with News is simply the most powerful way to hit page one, usually in under 2 weeks, safely, organically, and permanently. This is guaranteed SEO, or search engine optimization, on steroids, ranking quickly and sticking long term. Visit rankwith.news or rankwithnews.com to learn more and book a time to speak with a specialist about featuring your firm or your business in national 8-figure traffic sites that can help launch you to page one in a matter of hours and help you dominate your local marketplace. Get media exposure, rank higher in Google, build credibility, and win more customers and clients with rankwithnews.com. All right. So coming back to the questions, we travel back in time, we meet a young Fred, and you can give him some advice other than buy a lot of Bitcoin, hold it till 60K, right? What advice would you give to yourself and by extension, potentially, other law students who are looking to go, down the path you're going?
I'll be honest with you. This is one of the more difficult areas of practice. And I say that because of what we've already talked about. It's highly emotional, highly stressful. And so the advice that I would give to myself would be, get ready, find yourself a good way to manage the stress, because your life is going to be full of it. And, to be honest with you, I would probably counsel somebody new coming out of school to think about alternate areas of practice that doesn't have that stress, because it's awfully hard to find a work-life balance in this business. It's a 24/7 job that is difficult at best. And so that would be my, I suppose the other thing I would say would be, there's not many ways to sugarcoat this. And you can probably tell from our conversation so far, I'm pretty direct. And this is the way I am. I mean, when I talk to clients, this is how direct I am. And they seem to appreciate that. They want to know from the beginning what they're looking at. And so I'm not the type of guy to blow a lot of sunshine their way. If their case has problems, I tell them. And so, that would be my advice to somebody coming out. Be truthful, and be willing to accept a lot of stress and emotion in your job, because it's going to be full of it.
Gotcha. No, that's great advice, honestly. And yeah, no, I think a lot of people, they do beat around the bush a lot more than they should. And I can appreciate that. Again, I feel like our conversation has been very rapid fire in a way that a lot of my conversations are not with people, which is just something I just noticed. I've had hundreds of conversations with attorneys, and this one stands out just in your very direct nature that I don't often get with other attorneys. So, it is what it is. And it's just kind of neat. So, all right. Well, question number 2, I gave you my magic pen right here. And with this pen, Fred, you can change a law, add a law, remove a law. What are you going to change and why?
What I would change would be, at least in Colorado, and I think that probably in most states, there are very similar statutes for the issuance of a protection order. I think there are, and this is what used to be called restraining orders. And I think there are good reasons to have them, but they're also highly abused. And they're abused not only by the litigants, but by the lawyers. I know lawyers who the first thing they do is counsel their client to go get a restraining order, because it automatically puts the other party on the defensive from the first day of the case. Well, it has a host of implications. You can't own or possess or buy firearms. You're going to be restricted in what you do with your children. There are a lot of negative implications to a restraining order that may not be warranted. Some are. I mean, there are some bad people out there, and this is precisely what they need. But there are also people that maybe don't need to be subject to this kind of things. And when I find those cases, I try to convince the people to go with a no contact order rather than a protection order, because a protection order violation is a criminal offense. You go to jail. With an agreement for a no contact order, there's no jail. At most you could get a contempt motion. But so I would change the ability to get a protection order or a restraining order for some of the cases, and probably define better what cases I feel warrant the issuance of a restraining order.
Gotcha. That's a good answer. And I don't think I've heard quite that one before, but it's interesting because I have heard people say that they think that especially that restraining orders can be abused. They can be used maliciously or whatnot. So that's a fascinating area that I would love to see. And if somebody's out there listening and you want to pass some national legislation or talk to your congressman, your senator, go for it. Right. That sounds like a fertile area to talk about. So, well, Fred, thank you very much for spending time with me and my listeners today. I've appreciated your candor in this conversation. I do always like to give my guests the last word. Is there any final thoughts or parting ideas that you'd like to leave our listeners with?
No, there isn't. I appreciate what you do, because the one thing that there really isn't any time left for at the end of the day is to do a decent job trying to market your services. So this effort is very important. It's important to the survival of law firms and attorneys. And so, I appreciate these efforts.
Well, thank you very much for those kind words, and it's greatly appreciated. Well, you guys, you have been listening to The Attorney Post. I've been talking with Fred Dunsing of Dunsing Law, dunsinglaw.com. As always, link in the description down below. Phone calls will also be down there. Phone numbers will be at the bottom as well. 970-343-0023 in Avon, and 303-758-8981 in Denver. As always, this has been The Attorney Post, and though we do talk about lots of legal issues with attorneys on this podcast does not constitute legal advice. If you have a legal issue, you should always seek the advice of a competent attorney in your area who focuses on the matter that you need help with. However, if you live in the Denver, Colorado area, or live in Avon, I can clearly say Fred seems to have a very sharp mind, very direct way of conversationing and explaining things as well, which is great. And I think he would probably be a great resource. So as always, if you need a family attorney and you're in the Denver, Colorado area, link in the description down below. I think Fred, I can confidently say, would be a great resource for you. That being said, if you're listening to this podcast on YouTube, we always appreciate a like, subscribe, a comment, a share, whatever it is you want to do. If you're on any of the other podcast repositories out there, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon, whatever it happens to be, rate us, like us, share us, comment, whatever makes sense, especially if you know someone that could use the information that was in this podcast. Because at the end of the day, as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Until next time, thanks for listening, guys, and have a good one.
Thank you.